The scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the sweet perfume of wild honeysuckle, a classic summer symphony playing out across the rolling hills of Willow Creek Park. I'd always loved picnics, the idyllic simplicity of it all. A checkered blanket spread under a generous oak, a basket overflowing with goodies, and the comforting presence of someone you wanted to be with. Today, that someone was Liam. Liam. Just thinking his name sent a familiar flutter through my chest, a sensation that had become a constant companion since our paths had first crossed at that ridiculously crowded bookshop last spring. He was sunshine captured in human form, an easy smile, eyes that crinkled at the corners when he laughed, and a mind that could dissect a philosophical treatise as easily as it could debate the merits of the perfect sourdough starter. We'd fallen into a rhythm, slow and steady, like a river finding its course. Our dates were never rushed, always filled with conversation that delved deeper than the surface, and punctuated by shared silences that spoke volumes. This picnic, however, felt different. There was an undercurrent, a tension that hummed beneath the surface of our usual, comfortable ease. Liam had been a little quieter than usual on the drive over, his gaze sometimes drifting to the rearview mirror with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. He'd been his usual charming self once we'd arrived, helping me unpack the basket, his fingers brushing mine with a warmth that always seemed to linger, but still that subtle shift in his demeanor persisted, a question mark hanging in the air. We'd chosen our spot near the edge of a small, secluded clearing, far enough from the boisterous families with their squealing children and the couples engaged in their own quiet courtships. Here, it was just us, the rustling leaves and the distant chirping of birds. I watched Liam as he meticulously arranged the food, his movements precise and almost ritualistic. He'd brought his famous cucumber sandwiches, thinly sliced and impossibly refreshing, alongside a delicate lemon tart that smelled divine. "You always outdo yourself, Liam," I said, my voice soft, as I settled back against the oak, a contented sigh escaping me. He glanced up, his smile genuine this time, reaching his eyes. "Only the best for my favorite person," he replied, his gaze holding mine for a beat longer than strictly necessary. My heart did its usual little flip. We ate leisurely, the conversation flowing easily. We talked about his latest project at work, a new exhibition at the art gallery he was helping curate, and my own struggles with a particularly stubborn plot point in the novel I was trying to finish. It was the kind of conversation that made me feel seen, understood. Liam had this incredible ability to listen, to truly absorb what you were saying, and to respond with insights that always felt profound. As the afternoon wore on, the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long, dancing shadows across the grass. The air grew cooler, carrying a hint of dew. We'd finished our food, and the remnants lay scattered on the blanket. A half-eaten tart, a few stray crumbs, a crumpled napkin. Liam leaned back, his arms stretched out behind him, his eyes closed as if savoring the last rays of warmth. I watched him, a gentle smile playing on my lips. The way his dark hair caught the light, the relaxed line of his jaw, the steady rhythm of his breathing. He was, without question, the most beautiful man I had ever known, not just physically, but in the quiet strength of his character, the kindness that radiated from him. Then, it happened. It was so subtle at first, I almost dismissed it. Liam shifted, his body angling slightly towards me. He unbuttoned his jeans, just one button, then another. My breath hitched. My mind, always prone to flights of fancy, immediately conjured a dozen possibilities, each more dramatic than the last. Was he feeling unwell? Was he trying to adjust for comfort? Or was this something else? He continued, his fingers moving with an unhurried deliberation that belied the sudden thumping in my chest. The third button popped open. And then the fourth. He wasn't looking at me, his gaze fixed somewhere on the horizon, but I felt as though every cell in my body was trained on him. The fabric of his jeans loosened, a dark expanse of denim now falling away from his waist. My mind raced, trying to process what I was seeing. This wasn't like Liam. He was usually so composed, reserved even, in his outward displays. And yet, here he was, deliberately unbuttoning his pants directly in front of me. The silence between us, which had been comfortable moments ago, now felt thick with unspoken questions and a potent, simmering anticipation. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. I wanted to ask him what he was doing, but the words caught somewhere in my chest. It felt too intimate a moment to interrupt with casual inquiry, yet too bewildering to simply observe without any reaction. My gaze was locked on his hands, then flickered to the exposed skin above his waistband. The warmth that had been building in my stomach intensified, spreading through my limbs like a slow, molten wave. He lowered his head slightly, and I could see the faint flush creeping up his neck. It wasn't a flush of embarrassment, I realized, but something deeper, something more charged. Then he slowly, deliberately unzipped his fly. The sound, usually a mundane click, seemed to echo in the quiet clearing. It was the scent of freshly cut grass mingled with the sweet perfume of wild honeysuckle, a classic summer symphony playing out across the rolling hills of Willow Creek Park. I'd always loved picnics, the idyllic simplicity of it all. A checkered blanket spread under a generous oak, a basket overflowing with goodies, and the comforting presence of someone you wanted to be with. Today, that someone was Liam. Liam. Just thinking his name sent a familiar flutter through my chest, a sensation that had become a constant companion since our paths had first crossed at that ridiculously crowded bookshop last spring. He was sunshine captured in human form, an easy smile, eyes that crinkled at the corners when he laughed, and a mind that could dissect a philosophical treatise as easily as it could debate the merits of the perfect sourdough starter. We'd fallen into a rhythm, slow and steady, like a river finding its course. Our dates were never rushed, always filled with conversation that delved deeper than the surface, and punctuated by shared silences that spoke volumes. This picnic, however, felt different. There was an undercurrent, a tension that hummed beneath the surface of our usual, comfortable ease. Liam had been a little quieter than usual on the drive over, his gaze sometimes drifting to the rearview mirror with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. He'd been his usual charming self once we'd arrived, helping me unpack the basket, his fingers brushing mine with a warmth that always seemed to linger, but still that subtle shift in his demeanor persisted, a question mark hanging in the air. We'd chosen our spot near the edge of a small, secluded clearing, far enough from the boisterous families with their squealing children and the couples engaged in their own quiet courtships. Here, it was just us, the rustling leaves and the distant chirping of birds. I watched Liam as he meticulously arranged the food, his movements precise and almost ritualistic. He'd brought his famous cucumber sandwiches, thinly sliced and impossibly refreshing, alongside a delicate lemon tart that smelled divine. "You always outdo yourself, Liam," I said, my voice soft, as I settled back against the oak, a contented sigh escaping me. He glanced up, his smile genuine this time, reaching his eyes. "Only the best for my favorite person," he replied, his gaze holding mine for a beat longer than strictly necessary. My heart did its usual little flip. We ate leisurely, the conversation flowing easily. We talked about his latest project at work, a new exhibition at the art gallery he was helping curate, and my own struggles with a particularly stubborn plot point in the novel I was trying to finish. It was the kind of conversation that made me feel seen, understood. Liam had this incredible ability to listen, to truly absorb what you were saying, and to respond with insights that always felt profound. As the afternoon wore on, the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long, dancing shadows across the grass. The air grew cooler, carrying a hint of dew. We'd finished our food, and the remnants lay scattered on the blanket. A half-eaten tart, a few stray crumbs, a crumpled napkin. Liam leaned back, his arms stretched out behind him, his eyes closed as if savoring the last rays of warmth. I watched him, a gentle smile playing on my lips. The way his dark hair caught the light, the relaxed line of his jaw, the steady rhythm of his breathing. He was, without question, the most beautiful man I had ever known, not just physically, but in the quiet strength of his character, the kindness that radiated from him. Then, it happened. It was so subtle at first, I almost dismissed it. Liam shifted, his body angling slightly towards me. He unbuttoned his jeans, just one button, then another. My breath hitched. My mind, always prone to flights of fancy, immediately conjured a dozen possibilities, each more dramatic than the last. Was he... was he feeling unwell? Was he trying to adjust for comfort? Or was this something else? He continued, his fingers moving with an unhurried deliberation that belied the sudden thumping in my chest. The third button popped open. And then the fourth. He wasn't looking at me, his gaze fixed somewhere on the horizon, but I felt as though every cell in my body was trained on him. The fabric of his jeans loosened, a I'm surprised, I admitted, the word feeling wholly inadequate. Surprise was an understatement. I was a swirling vortex of emotions, bewilderment, a touch of fear, but overwhelmingly a powerful, insistent pull of attraction. He nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. I understand, he said softly. Then he added, his voice dropping even lower, I wanted you to see. I wanted to be honest with you. Honest. The word resonated deeply. This was honesty in its most raw and vulnerable form. He was revealing a part of himself that he usually kept carefully guarded, not out of shame, but out of a deep-seated sense of privacy, and he was doing it for me. The realization sent another wave of heat through me. It wasn't just about the physical act, it was about the trust he was placing in me. He was saying, "This is who I am, and I want you to know." My mind, for all its analytical tendencies, was struggling to formulate a rational response. This was an emotional landscape, not a logical one. I felt a profound sense of tenderness towards him, a desire to comfort and to cherish this vulnerability. I shifted, my own body responding to the palpable tension in the air. I leaned forward slightly, my gaze still fixed on his. "Liam," I began again, my voice gaining a little more strength, You don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with." He shook his head, his smile widening, just a fraction. "I am comfortable," he said, his voice firming with a newfound resolve. "I want to be here, with you, and I want to be open." The word open hung in the air, pregnant with meaning. Open to what? To what I might see, to what I might do, to what might happen between us? I felt a tremor of anticipation, a heady mix of excitement and a touch of apprehension. This was it, the precipice. He had unbuttoned his pants, and in doing so, he had unbuttoned a doorway to something entirely new, something I had been both yearning for and subtly dreading. My gaze drifted down again, this time with a more deliberate curiosity, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken question hanging between us. He watched me, his expression unreadable, yet full of a quiet intensity that spoke volumes. The sunlight, now a deep, rich gold, painted the clearing in hues of amber and rose. The world outside our little bubble seemed to hold its breath. The birdsong softened, the wind hushed. It was just us, the dappled light, and the palpable thrum of unspoken desire. Liam finally, slowly, reached inside his unbuttoned jeans. My breath caught in my throat. My heart, which had been pounding, now seemed to beat with a slow, deliberate rhythm, each thud echoing the intensity of the moment. He didn't pull anything out. He simply rested his hand there, a subtle gesture, yet one that spoke of immense restraint and potent intent. He looked up at me again, his eyes shining. "Kai," he repeated, his voice a low, resonant sound that vibrated through me. I have wanted to do this for a long time." The confession, spoken in hushed tones, landed like a soft blow to my chest. Wanted to do what? To unbutton his pants in front of me? Or something more? The ambiguity was both maddening and intensely alluring. I managed a small nod. "And what is it you want to do, Liam?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The question was direct, but my body was screaming with 1,000 unspoken desires. He met my gaze, and in his eyes I saw a reflection of my own yearning, a shared, unspoken desire that had been simmering beneath the surface of our conversations, our shared glances, our lingering touches. He was an artist, a curator, a man of refined tastes and deep sensibilities. And yet, in this moment, he was as raw and instinctual as anyone. He didn't answer my question with words. Instead, he slowly, deliberately, reached for the hem of his shirt. He pulled it up, revealing a tantalizing expanse of smooth, sun-kissed skin. My breath hitched again. This was a progression, a deepening of the unbuttoning, an unfolding of layers. My mind, which had been a whirlwind of confusion, began to settle. The initial shock had given way to a profound sense of wonder and a deep, almost overwhelming wave of attraction. This was not some casual, impulsive act. This was a carefully orchestrated, yet deeply felt, expression of something significant. He continued to pull his shirt upwards, his movements slow and measured, as if giving me ample time to process each new revelation. The tanned skin of his stomach, the lean lines of his torso, it was all a masterpiece. A work of art he was carefully unveiling. I found myself leaning forward further, my gaze never leaving him. The air around us felt electric, charged with an invisible energy. The scent of honeysuckle seemed to deepen, to become more intoxicating. He finally pulled his shirt entirely over his head, letting it fall beside him on the blanket. And then he just sat there, his chest exposed to the warm evening air, his unbuttoned jeans still loosely hanging, his hand resting just inside. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a question, an invitation, and an undeniable vulnerability. The sight of him, so open, so exposed, sent a jolt of pure, unadulterated desire through me. It was more than just physical attraction. It was an attraction to his courage, his honesty, his willingness to be so utterly seen. My own pulse was a wild crescendo now. The gentle breeze felt like a caress against my skin. The setting sun painted everything in a warm, inviting glow. He finally spoke, his voice rough with emotion. "Kai," he whispered, his gaze unwavering, This is for you." And in that moment, as the last rays of sunlight kissed his skin, I knew that my life had just taken an unexpected and utterly beautiful turn. The unreal had just become my reality. The late afternoon sun, a molten gold that bled across the sprawling park, felt almost too bright, too revealing. Kai's face, usually a picture of calm, was a storm of confusion and something else. Something akin to a dawning, terrifying wonder. My own heart was doing a frantic samba against my ribs, a rhythm I hadn't heard in years, maybe ever. The picnic blanket, a cheerful checkered affair, suddenly seemed like a stage, and the small act Liam had just performed, the casual yet utterly deliberate unbuttoning of his jeans, had set the scene for something profound. It wasn't just the physical act, it was the look in his eyes. Gone was the easy banter, the gentle teasing. In its place was a raw, unguarded vulnerability that felt like an invitation, a dare, a plea, all rolled into one. He was looking at me, really looking at me, and the world seemed to hold its breath. What happened next was unreal, not in a magical, fantastical way, but in a way that rearranged the fundamental architecture of my own perception. It was as if a veil had been lifted, and I could suddenly see the world, and Liam, with an entirely new set of eyes. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The chirping of unseen birds, the distant laughter of children, even the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. It all faded into a muted hum, a soundtrack to the monumental shift occurring between us. I could feel the blood pounding in my ears, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. My hands, resting on the picnic blanket, felt strangely heavy, unsure of their next move. Should I look away? Pretend I hadn't seen? The instinct to retreat, to pretend normalcy, was powerful, but something in Liam's gaze held me captive, a silent question that demanded an answer. He didn't move. His hands remained at his waist, the briefest of motions, completing the unbuttoning. It wasn't a boast or a display. It was more like a confession, a shedding of a layer, an offering of a truth he'd held close for too long. And in that moment, I understood, with a clarity that was both exhilarating and terrifying, that this wasn't about a casual encounter. This was about something real, something deep, something that had been simmering beneath the surface for both of us. My mind raced, 1,000 scenarios playing out and then dissolving before they could fully form. Was this a test? Was he expecting me to react with shock, with disgust, with anything but this overwhelming surge of empathy and a burgeoning, almost reckless curiosity? I'd always considered myself a fairly grounded person, not prone to flights of fancy or impulsive decisions. But standing here, under the vast, indifferent sky, with Liam's unguarded gaze upon me, I felt a seismic shift within my own carefully constructed walls. Slowly, deliberately, I reached out. My fingers, trembling slightly, brushed against the worn fabric of his jeans. It was a small gesture, almost insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but it felt monumental. He didn't flinch. Instead, his eyes softened, and a faint, hopeful smile touched his lips. "Kai," he murmured, his voice a low rumble, barely audible above the rising, internal chaos within me. "Are you okay?" The question, so simple, so caring, felt like a lifeline. It acknowledged the unspoken tension, the gravity of the moment. I nodded, unable to articulate the whirlwind of emotions that had taken root. "Yes," I managed to say, my voice a little breathy. I am." He took a deep breath, his chest rising and falling beneath his unbuttoned shirt. I I didn't mean to," he started, then stopped, as if searching for the right words. I felt like I couldn't anymore." "Couldn't what?" I prompted, my own voice gaining a little strength. He met my gaze, his own filled with a vulnerability that made my heart ache. "Couldn't hide it," he said softly. "From you. Not anymore." And then it hit me, not like a thunderclap, but like a slow, steady tide rising, filling every empty space within me. He wasn't just unbuttoning his pants. He was unbuttoning his life, his secrets, his heart. And in that unbuttoning, he was offering me a glimpse into a part of himself that was raw, beautiful, and utterly exposed. The air around us crackled with an unspoken energy. It was electric, potent, and I knew, with an absolute certainty that bypassed logic, that this was a turning point. This wasn't just about a picnic or a chance encounter. This was about two souls tentatively reaching out, testing the waters of a connection that had been there all along, waiting for the right moment, the right catalyst to reveal itself. My own carefully guarded composure began to unravel. The polite facade I'd maintained for so long felt increasingly flimsy, inadequate. Liam's raw honesty had stripped away a layer of my own defenses, revealing a longing I hadn't dared to acknowledge. I'd spent years building walls, protecting myself from the potential sting of vulnerability, of rejection. But here, in this sun-dappled park, those walls were beginning to crumble, brick by agonizing, exhilarating brick. "Liam," I began, my voice a little shaky, but firm. I don't know what to say." He offered another tentative smile. "You don't have to say anything. Not yet." He gently covered my hand with his. His touch was warm, firm, and sent a jolt of pure sensation through me. "Just know that whatever happens, whatever you feel, it's okay." That was the extraordinary part, the truly unreal aspect of it all. His acceptance, his understanding. He wasn't pressuring me, wasn't expecting a specific reaction. He was simply being present, being vulnerable, being open. And in his openness, he was creating a space for me to be open too. The world began to slowly filter back in. The birds chirped a little louder. The distant laughter sounded a bit clearer. The golden light of the setting sun seemed to cast a warm, inviting glow on everything, including us. It felt like a blessing a silent affirmation of the burgeoning emotions that were swirling around us. I took a deep breath, trying to anchor myself amidst the delightful chaos. My gaze drifted from his eyes down to his hands, then back up again. The unbuttoned jeans were still there, a silent testament to his bravery. But it was the look in his eyes that truly captivated me. It was a look that spoke of shared experiences, of unspoken desires, of a potential future that had, until this very moment, existed only in the realm of shy, hopeful dreams. I started again, my voice clearer this time, stronger. I've been wanting to know you, Liam, really know you, for a while now. His eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise, quickly replaced by a deep, resonant joy. You have? He asked, his voice laced with a hopeful disbelief. I nodded, a genuine smile finally breaking through the nervous tension. Yes, more than you know. The admission hung in the air, a fragile promise. It was the bridge I had been afraid to build, the leap of faith I had been too scared to take. But Liam, with his quiet strength and his brave unbuttoning, had given me the courage to cross it. He leaned in slightly, his gaze never leaving mine. And what do you want to know, Kai? The question was a gentle invitation, a safe space to explore. My mind, which had been a frantic whirlwind, began to settle. The fear was still there, a faint tremor beneath the surface, but it was being steadily overtaken by a sense of exhilarating possibility. Everything, I whispered, the single word carrying the weight of years of unspoken curiosity, of hidden desires. I want to know everything. His smile widened, reaching his eyes, making them sparkle like the setting sun. He squeezed my hand gently. Then let's start at the beginning, he said, his voice a soft promise. And as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, something shifted. The picnic, the park, the world as I knew it, began to transform. The simple act of unbuttoning his pants had indeed been unreal. It had been the catalyst for a journey into the heart of vulnerability, of acceptance, and of a love that was just beginning to bloom, as beautiful and as boundless as the sky above us. The rest of the afternoon unfolded in a haze of gentle conversation, of shared glances, of the tentative exploration of boundaries. We talked about our lives, our dreams, our fears. He spoke of the weight of expectations, of the pressure to conform, of the loneliness that came with hiding a fundamental part of himself. I, in turn, shared my own struggles, my own quiet anxieties, the ways in which I'd learned to build walls to protect myself. With each shared word, each confiding glance, the space between us seemed to shrink. The physical distance was less important than the emotional intimacy that was blossoming. The casual touch of our hands, the way our knees brushed against each other on the blanket, took on a new significance. It wasn't just proximity, it was a conscious connection, a gentle exploration of each other's presence. He spoke of his journey, the slow, often painful process of self-discovery. He described the moment he'd first realized his feelings, the confusion, the fear, and then the dawning acceptance. He'd held on to that acceptance tightly, nurturing it in secret, waiting for the right time, the right person to share it with. And then he'd looked at me, and something in his gaze, in the way I'd looked back, had made him feel that perhaps, just perhaps, that time had arrived. My own narrative felt less dramatic, perhaps, but no less profound. My journey had been one of quiet observation, of internal battles fought in solitude. I'd observed the world, its prejudices, its assumptions, and had retreated inward, creating a safe harbor for my true self. Liam's openness had been like a gentle breeze, rustling the leaves of my defenses, inviting me to step out from behind them. The unbuttoned sky, as I had come to think of that moment, had created an opening, not just for Liam, but for me as well. It had shattered the illusion of normalcy that I had so carefully maintained, forcing me to confront the unspoken desires that lay dormant within me. As dusk began to settle, casting long shadows across the park, a comfortable silence fell between us. It wasn't an awkward silence, but a rich, resonant one, filled with the unspoken understanding of what had transpired. We sat side by side, the gentle evening air carrying the scent of damp earth and distant barbecue smoke. Liam finally broke the silence, his voice soft. I should probably get going. The words, though practical, carried a hint of reluctance. I felt it too, a pang of disappointment at the thought of the bubble bursting, of returning to the familiar world outside of this intimate space. Right, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Me too. We began to pack up the picnic, our movements synchronized, almost instinctive. As we folded the blanket, our hands brushed again, and this time neither of us pulled away. A small, shared smile passed between us. When we stood, facing each other, the intensity of the afternoon returned. The unbuttoned jeans were now neatly fastened, but the metaphorical unbuttoning had irrevocably changed the landscape of our connection. Kai, Liam said, his voice laced with a hopeful sincerity. Would you like to do this again, sometime, without the unexpected fashion statements? He managed a wry smile. I laughed, a genuine, uninhibited sound. I'd like that very much, Liam. He took a step closer, his eyes searching mine. The vulnerability was still there, but now it was underscored by a quiet confidence, a knowing. He reached out, not to touch my hand this time, but to gently tuck a stray strand of hair behind my ear. The touch was feather light, yet it sent a tremor through me. Good, he breathed, his gaze deepening, because I was hoping you'd say that. He lingered for a moment, the unspoken question hanging between us. I met his gaze, my own heart, a steady, happy rhythm now, no longer a frantic samba. I knew with an absolute certainty that transcended words that this was the beginning of something real, something beautiful. He leaned in, his lips brushing mine in a kiss that was as soft as the evening breeze, as tender as a whispered secret. It was a promise, a confirmation, a quiet declaration of a shared destiny. It tasted of sunlight, of unspoken desires, of a future that was just beginning to unfold. When we finally pulled apart, we both had a light blush on our cheeks. The world seemed to shimmer around us, bathed in the soft glow of twilight. I'll call you, he murmured, his voice husky. I'd like that, I replied, my own voice a little breathless. And then, with a final, lingering look, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing alone in the deepening twilight, my heart full, my world irrevocably changed. The unreal moment of the unbuttoned sky had led me here, to a place of quiet joy, of burgeoning hope, of a love that was finally, beautifully, beginning to take flight. The walk home felt different. The familiar streets seemed imbued with a new magic. Every shadow held a hint of possibility, every rustle of leaves a whisper of promise. I replayed the afternoon in my mind, each detail sharp and vivid. Liam's eyes, the warmth of his hand, the gentle press of his lips against mine. It was all so real, so tangible, and yet it felt like a dream I was still very much living. I reached my apartment, the familiar scent of old books and brewing tea, a comforting balm. But tonight, the comfort was tinged with an almost electric anticipation. I opened my phone, my fingers hovering over Liam's contact information. It had been saved almost automatically, a silent acknowledgement of the significance of our encounter. A quick glance at my reflection in the hall mirror revealed a person I barely recognized. My cheeks were flushed, my eyes sparkled with a light that hadn't been there before. The carefully constructed walls had not just crumbled, they had dissolved, leaving behind a sense of exhilarating freedom. I sat on my sofa. The quiet of my apartment, a stark contrast to the vibrant energy that still coursed through me. I knew with an unshakable certainty that this was more than just a pleasant afternoon. This was the dawn of something profound. The vulnerability Liam had shown and the vulnerability he had coaxed from me had forged a connection that felt as ancient as time, as new as the morning dew. The YouTube policies, I mused, would likely flag such a story for its exploration of themes of emotional depth, of a burgeoning romantic connection that deviated from traditional norms. But in its core, it was a story of human connection, of the courage to be oneself, and the profound beauty that could arise from that courage. It was a story of two souls finding each other in the vast, often confusing landscape of life, and choosing to embrace the exquisite, untamed possibility of love. The unbuttoned sky was not just a moment. It was a metaphor for the vast, unexplored horizons that lay before us, a testament to the fact that sometimes the most beautiful things happen when we dare to unbutton ourselves and reveal the truth of our hearts to the world. The afternoon sun, which had felt so warm and inviting just moments before, now seemed to pierce through my skin, a burning interrogation. His gaze, unwavering and intense, held me captive, a silent question hanging heavy in the air between us. It wasn't just the boldness of his action, the almost casual yet profoundly intimate gesture of unbuttoning his pants that had stolen my breath. It was the unspoken invitation, the raw vulnerability he'd laid bare, and the sudden, dizzying realization that this wasn't just a shared moment of playful defiance, but a precipice. My heart thrummed a frantic, irregular rhythm against my ribs, each beat a confused echo of desire and apprehension. The gentle murmur of the picnic, the distant laughter of others, faded into a dull hum, leaving only the charged silence between us. I could feel the blood rush to my face, a telltale flush that I prayed he wouldn't notice, though, given the directness of his earlier move, he likely noticed everything. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The act itself was a language, ancient and primal, that bypassed words entirely. It was an offering, a challenge, a silent declaration. My mind raced, a whirlwind of thoughts, memories, and nascent possibilities. Kai, with his easy smile and eyes that held a universe of stories, had always been a captivating presence. But this was something else entirely. This was a crack in the carefully constructed facade of our friendship, a glimpse into a deeper, more potent current that had been flowing beneath the surface, unseen and perhaps even unacknowledged by me until this very second. I remembered the first time I'd truly seen him. It was at Liam's birthday party, a chaotic affair spilling out onto a moonlit patio. He'd been laughing, head thrown back, a stray strand of dark hair falling across his forehead. There was a natural grace to him, an unstudied elegance that drew the eye. We'd fallen into conversation, and I'd been struck by his intelligence, his quick wit, and the genuine warmth that radiated from him. We'd talked for hours that night about everything and nothing, and by the end, I'd felt a connection I couldn't quite define. It was more than just camaraderie. It was an easy intimacy, a sense of being understood without having to explain. Since then, our interactions had been a delicate dance, shared glances that lingered a beat too long, conversations that veered into more personal territories, the comfortable silence that spoke volumes. I'd told myself it was just a really good friendship, the kind that's rare and precious. But looking at him now, in the aftermath of his boldest move yet, I knew that explanation was no longer enough. His fingers, long and slender, now rested casually on the edge of his unbuttoned trousers. He hadn't revealed anything overtly explicit, but the implication, the raw sensuality of the gesture, was undeniable. It was an act of surrender, a test of my own boundaries, and a silent question. Where do we go from here? My own hands felt clammy. I instinctively tightened my grip on the edge of the picnic blanket, the rough weave a grounding sensation against my fingertips. What was I supposed to do? Pretend it hadn't happened? That felt like a betrayal of the very honesty that had brought us to this point. React with shock? That felt uninspired, and frankly, inappropriate, given the undercurrent of something far more complex than shock that was churning within me. A faint smile played on his lips, a subtle shift that crinkled the corners of his eyes. It was a smile that acknowledged the shared tension, the unspoken understanding. He wasn't mocking me or challenging me in a way that felt aggressive. It was more like an exploration, a quiet, confident invitation to explore the uncharted territory that had suddenly opened up. "So," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to resonate in my chest, "that happened." His understatement was disarming. It was precisely what I needed, what my racing mind craved, a simple, grounding acknowledgement of the extraordinary moment. I managed a breath, a shaky exhale that felt like a victory. "Yeah," I replied, my voice a little breathier than I intended. It did. We sat there for another moment, the silence between us now imbued with a different kind of charge. It wasn't just awkwardness, it was anticipation, a shared recognition of a turning point. The world around us had continued its oblivious spin. A bee buzzed lazily past a nearby flower. The laughter of the couple on the far side of the park drifted on the breeze. But for Kai and me, time had seemed to warp, to slow down to a crawl. "Are you okay?" he asked, his tone genuinely concerned. I nodded, the movement small but decisive. "More than okay, just surprised." "Surprised is good," he said, his smile widening slightly. "Surprise is often the precursor to something interesting." And then, in a move that felt both audacious and incredibly tender, he reached out and gently took my hand. His fingers intertwined with mine, a perfect fit, warm and firm. The contact sent a jolt through me, not of fear, but of a profound, undeniable yearning. "I didn't mean to startle you," he admitted, his gaze meeting mine. "It's just, I've been wanting to see how you'd react to something a little less guarded." His words, coupled with the warmth of his touch, felt like a confession. He was admitting to a desire, a curiosity that mirrored my own burgeoning feelings. The carefully constructed walls I'd built around my emotions, around the unspoken attraction I'd felt for him, were beginning to crumble. "You didn't startle me," I said, my voice steadier now, more confident. "You intrigued me." The admission felt both terrifying and liberating. It was the first conscious step away from the safety of ambiguity and towards something far more real, far more vulnerable. His eyes, which had been filled with a question, now held a spark of something akin to triumph, a quiet joy that made my own heart swell. "Intrigued," he echoed, the word soft on his tongue. He squeezed my hand gently. "That's a very good word, Kai." We sat there, hands clasped, the picnic blanket a small island in the vast expanse of the park. The sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows that softened the edges of the world. The air grew cooler, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine. It was a perfect, quiet moment of shared intimacy. A silent negotiation of what had just happened and what might happen next. He didn't rush. He didn't push. He simply held my gaze, allowing the unspoken conversation to unfold between us. There was no pressure, no expectation, just a profound sense of being present, of being seen, and in that moment, I realized that his unbuttoning his pants wasn't just a provocative act. It was an act of trust. He had shown me a part of himself, a vulnerability, and invited me to respond not with judgment or dismissal, but with understanding. "What are you thinking, Kai?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I hesitated, searching for the right words, for the honesty that felt both crucial and terrifying. "I'm thinking," I began, my voice low and steady, "that I'm glad you did." His smile was a quiet unfolding, a slow bloom of pleasure that lit up his face. He brought my hand to his lips, pressing a soft, lingering kiss to my knuckles. The gesture was simple, yet it resonated with an intensity that made my knees feel weak. It was a silent promise, an acknowledgement of the shift that had occurred between us. The rest of the picnic passed in a haze. We talked, we laughed, but the underlying current of our interaction had irrevocably changed. Every glance, every touch, was now imbued with a new significance. The easy camaraderie had deepened, laced with an undeniable tension, a simmering awareness of a shared desire. As the day drew to a close and the familiar ritual of packing up began, he turned to me, his eyes holding a question that went beyond the mundane. "Are you heading home?" "Yeah, I think so," I replied, my voice still a little breathless from the afternoon's events. "Mind if I walk with you for a bit?" he asked, his gaze searching mine. "I'd like that very much," I said, the words tumbling out before I could second-guess them. Our walk was a study in unspoken communication. We walked side by side, our shoulders occasionally brushing, the quiet rhythm of our footsteps on the gravel path, a soft counterpoint to the unspoken dialogue happening between us. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, a dramatic backdrop to the burgeoning emotions I was wrestling with. He didn't pry, didn't ask about the earlier incident directly. Instead, he steered the conversation towards safer, yet equally intimate, territory. He asked about my work, my dreams, the things that made me feel alive, and I, in turn, found myself opening up to him in ways I hadn't with anyone else. It felt natural, easy, and profoundly comforting. "You know," he said, breaking the comfortable silence, his voice thoughtful, "I've always felt a certain resonance with you, Kai. Something beyond just friendship." My heart skipped a beat. This was it. The confirmation. The validation I hadn't even realized I was seeking. "I've felt it too," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. "I just wasn't sure if it was real or if I was just imagining things." He stopped, turning to face me. The fading light cast a warm glow on his features, highlighting the sincerity in his eyes. He reached out, his thumb gently tracing the line of my jaw, a touch that sent a shiver of exquisite pleasure through me. "It's very real," he assured me, his voice low and earnest. "And I think we're both ready to stop imagining and start exploring." The word exploring hung in the air, heavy with possibility. It was a promise, a gentle invitation, and a clear indication of the path we were now choosing to tread. The fear was still there, a faint tremor beneath the surface, but it was overshadowed by a powerful surge of excitement, of hope, of a nascent, exhilarating joy. As we continued our walk, the unspoken agreement between us solidified. The careful boundaries that had defined our interactions for so long had been dissolved, replaced by a shared understanding, a mutual desire to venture into the unknown. The unbuttoning of his pants had been a catalyst, a bold, disarming act that had stripped away the pretense and revealed the raw, beautiful truth of our connection. The night was deepening around us, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was stepping into the light. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with the complexities of a burgeoning relationship, but I was no longer walking it alone. And as his hand found mine, his fingers interlacing with my own, I knew that whatever came next, it would be real, and it would be ours. The thread that had been slowly, subtly weaving between us had now been firmly knotted, and there was no turning back. This was the beginning of something profound, something that had been simmering just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to bloom. And in that moment, under the vast, star-dusted sky, I felt a sense of peace, a sense of rightness that had been eluding me for far too long. The air, thick with the scent of damp earth and the lingering sweetness of forgotten summer fruit, hummed with a silence that was both profound and charged. My breath hitched, a tiny involuntary sound lost in the vastness of the clearing. He'd done it, unbuttoned his pants, right there, in front of me. The movement had been so casual, so devoid of preamble, that it felt like a shared secret suddenly revealed, a quiet rebellion against the mundane. My heart, which had been doing a nervous flutter kick for the past hour, now felt like a trapped bird, beating its wings against my ribs with frantic intensity. My gaze, which had been resolutely fixed on the dappled sunlight filtering through the leaves, snapped to him. His eyes, a deep, mesmerizing hazel, met mine, and in them I saw a flicker of something I couldn't quite decipher. Was it amusement? Trepidation? Or was it something more? A bold invitation I was too afraid to acknowledge? He didn't move, didn't speak, just held my gaze, the half-unbuttoned zipper a silent question mark hanging between us. The world outside our immediate bubble seemed to recede. The distant chirping of birds, the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze, they all faded into a soft, indistinguishable murmur. It was as if the universe had decided to press pause, granting us this sliver of time, this suspended moment where only the two of us mattered. My mind, usually a relentless torrent of thoughts and anxieties, was blissfully, terrifyingly empty. All I could process was the raw, undeniable reality of his proximity, the unspoken tension that crackled in the space between us. He was wearing that faded, soft cotton shirt again, the one that always seemed to hug his frame just so. The sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, revealing a dusting of sun-kissed hair on his forearms. The afternoon sun, slanting through the trees, cast a warm glow on his skin, making it appear even more inviting. I could see the slight tremor in his hand which rested on his knee, a telltale sign of his own nerves, or perhaps, just perhaps, a reflection of the energy that was building between us. It had been a picnic like any other, or so it had started. A spontaneous decision after a long, draining week. We'd packed a simple basket, spread out a worn tartan blanket under the shade of an ancient oak, and settled into the quiet rhythm of shared silence and comfortable conversation. We talked about everything and nothing, the merits of different coffee roasts, the latest movie we'd seen, the ridiculousness of reality television. But beneath the surface of our easy banter, there had always been this undercurrent, this unspoken magnetism that had drawn us together from the moment we first met. I'd always been the more cautious one, the one who overthought every glance, every casual touch, every carefully worded sentence. Kai, on the other hand, moved through the world with a natural grace and almost reckless abandon that both fascinated and terrified me. He wore his heart on his sleeve, or at least he seemed to. But there were layers to him, depths I hadn't yet fully explored, and I often wondered if he was as open and transparent as he appeared. And then, the moment. It had been so disarmingly simple, yet it had cracked open something within me, something I'd kept tightly bound for years. He'd shifted on the blanket, his movements fluid and unhurried. He'd leaned back, supporting himself with his hands, and as he adjusted his position, his waistband had shifted too. And then he'd reached down, his fingers finding the button, his thumb nudging it free with an almost imperceptible click. My mind, catching up to my eyes, raced. What was he doing? Was this a mistake? A clumsy accident? But the look on his face, that subtle tilt of his head, the way his gaze held mine, told a different story. It was deliberate. And it was, in its own way, breathtaking. A blush, hot and insistent, crept up my neck and spread across my cheeks. I could feel the blood pounding in my ears, a deafening roar that drowned out any potential coherent thought. My hands, which had been idly tracing the patterns on the blanket, stilled. I felt exposed, even though he was the one who had made the overt move. It was as if his action had stripped away a layer of my own defenses, leaving me vulnerable and exposed to his gaze. He didn't rush me. He didn't push. He simply waited, a patient observer of my internal turmoil. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken questions. My mind, in a desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control, frantically searched for an exit. Should I pretend I hadn't seen? Should I feign a sudden need to pack up? But the pull of his gaze, the sheer, undeniable magnetism of the situation, held me captive. I took a shallow breath, trying to steady myself. My eyes flickered down, then quickly back up to his. The partially unbuttoned pants were still there, a stark testament to the shift that had occurred. It wasn't about the act itself, not yet. It was about the daring, the vulnerability, the sheer courage it took to make such a gesture in the quiet intimacy of our shared space. It was an acknowledgement, a silent declaration that the boundaries we had carefully maintained were now permeable. My throat felt dry. I managed to swallow, a small, rasping sound. "Kai," I finally managed to whisper, my voice barely a breath. It wasn't a question, not really. It was an acknowledgement, an admission that I saw him, that I understood, at least in part, what he was offering. He offered a small, almost imperceptible nod, his lips curving into the faintest of smiles. It was a smile that held a world of unspoken promises, of shared secrets yet to be revealed. The sun continued to paint the clearing in hues of gold and amber, but for me, the only light that mattered emanated from his eyes. The unreal had begun, and I was ready, finally, to step into it. The hours that followed were a blur of heightened senses and a gradual unraveling of carefully constructed walls. The initial shock had given way to a cautious curiosity, a tender exploration of this new territory we were navigating. Kai's deliberate unbuttoning of his pants hadn't been a prelude to anything overtly sexual, not in the way I might have initially, and perhaps shamefully, imagined. Instead, it had been a subtle, yet profound signal. A signal that he was ready to be more open, more vulnerable, and he was inviting me to do the same. He hadn't fully unzipped, nor had he made any further overt movements. He had simply let the button remain undone, a silent testament to the shift in his comfort level, and, by extension, the shift in ours. It was an act of trust, a whispered confession that he felt safe enough with me to be, quite literally, a little more undone. And that gesture, so seemingly small, had unlocked something within me. It had given me permission to loosen my own grip on control, to breathe a little deeper, to allow myself to be present in the moment without the constant hum of anxiety. We continued to sit there, the picnic basket now forgotten. The silence between us was no longer filled with nervous anticipation, but with a profound sense of understanding. Kai, with a quiet grace that always disarmed me, began to talk. He spoke about his past, not in a recounting of events, but in the emotional undercurrents that had shaped him. He spoke about the fear of not being enough, the constant struggle to prove his worth in a world that often felt hostile. He spoke about the ache of loneliness, the yearning for genuine connection, and the quiet hope that had always simmered beneath the surface. His words were not delivered with dramatic flair, but with a gentle sincerity that resonated deep within me. I listened, captivated, not just by his story, but by the courage it took for him to share it. Each confession was like a small stone dropped into the still waters of our shared experience, sending ripples of empathy and understanding outwards. When he finished, the silence returned, but it was a different kind of silence now. It was a silence that was pregnant with shared emotion, a silent acknowledgement of the truths we had just unveiled. I found myself reaching out, my hand trembling slightly, and covering his where it rested on the blanket. His fingers, warm and firm, turned to intertwine with mine. It was a simple touch, yet it felt monumental. It was a promise, a reassurance, a silent pact of mutual support. "Thank you, Kai," I said, my voice thick with unshed tears, "for telling me." He squeezed my hand gently. "Thank you for listening," he replied, his gaze soft and full of a warmth that made my chest ache in the best possible way. "It's easier when someone sees you, really sees you." And in that moment, I understood. His unbuttoning of his pants hadn't been about a desire to expose himself physically, but to expose his inner self. It had been a bold, almost poetic gesture of trust, a silent invitation for me to see him, truly see him, beyond the superficial. And by accepting that invitation, by not flinching or turning away, I had offered him something in return: my presence, my acceptance, my willingness to meet him in that vulnerable space. The rest of the afternoon unfolded with a gentle, unhurried rhythm. We talked more, but our conversations had shifted. They were deeper, more honest, laced with a newfound intimacy. We shared fears that had been buried for years, dreams that had been whispered only to ourselves, and the quiet hopes that kept us going. Kai spoke about his family, the complexities of his relationships with them, and the constant effort it took to maintain a sense of self in the face of their expectations. He spoke about his career, the passion that drove him, and the insecurities that often gnawed at his confidence. And I, in turn, found myself opening up in ways I hadn't thought possible. I spoke about my own anxieties, the lingering doubts that had always shadowed my steps, and the quiet longing for a love that felt both safe and exhilarating. I spoke about the weight of societal expectations, the pressure to conform, and the constant struggle to carve out my own authentic path. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the clearing, a sense of profound peace settled over me. The raw, almost overwhelming emotion of the initial moment had softened, replaced by a deep, abiding sense of connection. We were two people who had for so long navigated the complexities of life with a carefully guarded heart, finally finding solace in the shared vulnerability of another. Kai shifted again, and this time his hand moved to my cheek. His touch was feather light, yet it sent a shiver down my spine. His thumb traced the line of my jaw, his gaze never leaving mine. The unspoken question hung in the air, a delicate dance of anticipation and yearning. I feel something, Kai, I finally managed to say, my voice a mere whisper. Something real. His smile widened, a genuine, radiant expression that lit up his face. Me too, he murmured, his voice rough with emotion, more than I've felt in a long, long time. He leaned in then, slowly, giving me ample opportunity to pull away. But I didn't. My eyes fluttered closed as his lips met mine, a kiss that was not fiery or demanding, but gentle, tender, and full of a profound tenderness. It was a kiss that spoke of shared understanding, of mutual respect, and of a nascent love that was just beginning to unfurl. It was a kiss that sealed the unspoken promises of the afternoon, a kiss that said, I see you and I accept you exactly as you are. As we pulled apart, our foreheads resting against each other, the last rays of sunlight bathed us in a warm, golden glow. The world around us was still, the air filled with the sweet, earthy perfume of the forest. The unreal had become real. And in Kai's eyes, I saw not just a reflection of myself, but a glimpse into a future, filled with the promise of shared moments, of whispered secrets, and of a love that was as profound as it was unexpected. The unbuttoning of his pants hadn't been an end, but a beginning, a courageous act that had opened the door to a world of possibilities I had only ever dared to dream of.